Welcome back, folks. We're living in an era where everything is political, from your sneakers to your sandwich, and apparently now even your steering wheel. The same left that tells you love wins and hate has no home here seems to make a little exception when it comes to anyone driving a Tesla or daring to step outside their ideological bubble. Today, we're diving into a series of clips that perfectly capture this cultural clown show, starting with a 61-year-old woman getting pummeled on Route 66, not because she cut someone off, but because she drives the wrong electric car. That's right, folks. We've reached the point where Punch Buggy has been replaced by Punch Tesla, and people screaming about tolerance are throwing fists in traffic. So buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy, hypocritical ride.
Take a look at this. This is video from the victim's Tesla camera. It shows a green car pulling up to a Tesla on busy Route 66, then swerving in front to box the Tesla in. The driver then walks over to the 61-year-old woman in the Tesla and reportedly starts hitting her while she's sitting behind the wheel. At one point, the woman says she bit the man's hand. Moments later, the passenger of the green car appears to walk over and pull the attacker away. They finally get back in their car and drive off. Wow. We spoke to the victim today, who said she was terrified and can't understand why anyone would do this.
I was just stunned, and I wished that I would have had someone with me that would have protected me. I'm just appalled. I didn't buy my car for a political statement. I bought my car because it's really fun to drive, and my politics have nothing to do with that. And I'm ashamed of our society and what they're doing.
The victim, along with the other Tesla owner who received a threatening note and text, have both now signed up for a gun safety course at a gun range north of Flagstaff. They tell us they don't feel safe right now and want to be able to protect themselves.
Ah, yes, the modern American left, the group that chants love Trump's hate while apparently thinking it's perfectly acceptable to physically assault a 61-year-old woman for driving the wrong electric car. Welcome to the Upside Down, folks, where the people screaming about fascism are out here practicing roadside MMA because they can't emotionally process a Tesla badge. Let's break the story down because, as usual, the media coverage is light on facts and heavy on a convenient narrative. First off, notice how the news segment plays the footage without once asking the obvious question, why would someone risk jail time just to attack a total stranger? They leave that hanging in the air, like it's some random act of madness, but conveniently ignore the glaring cultural undertones fueling it. And let's not sugarcoat this. This was a politically motivated hate crime. The victim, Susan, was not tailgating, wasn't involved in a prior altercation. No, her crime was existing in public while driving a car associated with Elon Musk, who in today's clown world has become the left's boogeyman. The attacker targeted her because of what he assumed her car meant about her politics. That's textbook prejudice, weaponized in broad daylight. But the real rhetorical sleight of hand here is how the media tries to frame this as a random road rage. They never outright say it's politically motivated, but they sprinkle in phrases like politically charged and can't understand why anyone would do this, as if this wasn't the inevitable outcome of nearly a year of unhinged mainstream and Democrat anti-Elon rhetoric. From blue check marks on X screeching about billionaires to late night hosts turning Musk into the devil incarnate, the climate has been carefully manufactured. This isn't isolated, it's cultural rot in action. The entire news package is an appeal to emotion. It's built to make you feel bad without asking why the left's rhetoric is radicalizing lunatics. No analysis of the fact that Elon Musk is registered independent who literally made the world's most popular EV, but sure, let's pretend Tesla ownership is now a MAGA hat. Then there's a classic Mott and Bailey fallacy. The media's safe claim is, look, it's just road rage. But they know good and well that the real underlying implication is that this is an isolated, apolitical event. They want to avoid admitting that their entire narrative machine, the one that's demonized Elon, free speech, and anyone who doesn't kneel at the altar of woke orthodoxy, has inspired idiots like the one who attacked this lady's car to act out violently. And here's another thing they won't mention. The attacker wasn't arrested on the spot. He was cited, as if punching a senior citizen through her car window is a parking ticket. Now, you know well that if the roles were reversed, if a MAGA guy assaulted a woman in a Prius, the media would have called it domestic terrorism before the ink on the police report dried. But when it's someone acting out left-wing rage, cited and due in court on Monday. Let's also point out how conveniently the media ignores that both Tesla owners in the story signed up for a gun safety course afterward. That's not just a throwaway detail, that's a cultural indictment. These are people who likely never imagined they'd need to own a firearm. But after seeing firsthand how unhinged, politically fueled violence is creeping into daily life, they're waking up to reality. Because here's the truth, the left is so desperate to punch Nazis, they started punching grandmas and Teslas. Overall, this story is the logical endpoint of a culture that demonizes its political opponents, not as people with different opinions, but as literal villains who deserve violence. When you spend years screaming that Trump and Elon Musk are a threat to democracy and anyone who doesn't comply is on the wrong side of history, don't be surprised when some idiot turns that rhetoric into fists. So to the media hacks wringing their hands and pretending to be appalled, save it. You lit this fire, you cheered it on every time you said punch a Nazi without defining who the Nazi was, and now you're too shocked that the mob thinks it's open season on anyone who bought the wrong car. So to be clear, this isn't road rage, this is ideological derangement syndrome, and it's only going to get worse until people start holding the culture makers responsible, not just the thugs throwing punches. And speaking of the brilliancy of the left, here we have Tim Walz's daughter explaining to us why she's such an upstanding, virtuous citizen.
I got into grad school.
Congratulations.
I will not be attending starting this fall, though, and I will no longer be attending the university that I originally applied for. I applied for one school. I kind of had my heart set on it. That's what I wanted to do. I'm not going to name the institution, but given recent events, I am not going to give my money, go into debt for support institutions that don't support their students and their right to protest and, speak out for their communities. That's just not where I'm at. Students deserve to be protected. I'm not worried about if I were to be protected or not at said institution. I'm, privileged white woman. But I'm not going to put myself in a position, where I'm giving money or supporting institutions that don't support their students. I know that has nothing to do with the students that currently go there, a lot of the faculty. But, the people at the top are making those decisions, and I decided that I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to do a little bit more research going forward, making sure I'm applying to schools that align with my values, and then maybe start in a year, which is okay. I'm not really in a rush. So yeah, just figured I'd update you all on that.
Oh, I get it. You're retarded. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean, you've proudly announced to the world that you've been handed one of the greatest privileges in modern society, a graduate school acceptance, and you've decided to throw it away in a glorious display of self-flagellating nonsense because the administration didn't properly protect students who are breaking the rules. Now let's unpack this little TikTok dissertation because it's a masterclass in empty narcissistic virtue signaling that has infected the modern left. First, Tim Walz's daughter opens by saying she got into grad school but won't attend because the university failed to protect protesters. Here's what she conveniently leaves out. These so-called protests, these so-called students she's defending, aren't peaceful protesters handing out flyers. They're staging illegal occupations, disrupting classes, destroying property, and in many cases intimidating Jewish students and other dissenters. The very institutions she's boycotting aren't cracking down on free speech. They're trying to enforce basic rules so education can actually happen. But the real kicker here is her use of that tired, embarrassing rhetorical crutch. As a privileged white woman, that line is a social justice equivalent of a participation trophy. She invokes her race and privilege not out of any real reflection, but to shield herself from criticism and broadcast her faux martyrdom. It's textbook virtue signaling. Look how aware I am of my privilege. I'm so enlightened. I'm willing to throw away an education to prove it. I'm so good. Then there's the logical fallacy at the heart of her entire statement, the straw man, where she claims that the institution doesn't support students' right to protest. But that's not what's happening. No university in America is banning peaceful protests. They're enforcing codes of conduct against students who block entrances, harass faculty, and make their campus unsafe. What she really means here is, I want the school to tolerate chaos without consequences. which isn't free speech. That's anarchy with a very high tuition bill. And let's talk about the glaring narcissism embedded in this entire spectacle. Tampon Tim's daughter says she applied to one school and her heart was set on it. So to recap, this wasn't a wide, thoughtful search for the best academic program. This was a vanity project. And when the university didn't live up to her political purity test, she turned her academic future into a public therapy session. This isn't activism. It's a tantrum with a TikTok filter. And her final point is a true cherry on top. She says she's going to research schools that align with her values, as if higher education is a political dating app. Newsflash, grad school isn't supposed to validate your worldview. It's supposed to challenge you, expose you to competing ideas, and force you to think critically. But that's the entire problem with this new breed of activist. They don't want education. They want ideological daycare. And here's what she really doesn't want you to notice. She's not giving anything up. There's no sacrifice here. She's delaying school, not canceling it. She's publicly declaring how brave she is while knowing full well that she'll eventually land at some hyper-progressive university that rolls out the red carpet for her and her empty moral posturing. So to Tampon Tim's daughter and every other self-obsessed, privilege-flexing pseudo-revolutionary, spare us a sanctimony. You're not fighting injustice. You're fighting imaginary dragons to inflate your own sense of purpose. And in the meantime, you're wasting opportunities millions of people would kill for, all so you can pat yourself on the back for a stand no one asked you to take. This isn't activism. It's narcissistic LARPing dressed up as social justice, and the only thing you're really protesting is your own lack of self-awareness. Speaking of which, we've got multi-millionaire Disney actresses now complaining about how oppressed they are because pronouns.
It isn't easy.
Oh, shut up.
None of it is.
Nobody cares.
Waking up and choosing to be yourself, proclaiming a space belongs to you when you don't feel welcomed, teaching people on a daily basis how to address you, and dealing with the frustration of reteaching people a word that has been in the human vocabulary since the dawn of time. They, them. Words used to describe pedantically two or more people, poetically, a person who is simply more. It isn't easy to ask people to treat you with dignity, since you should just have it because it's a given. It isn't easy to learn to grow who you are if the world around you is knocking at your door, telling you to stay inside.
Oh yeah, here we go again. Another millionaire celebrity standing on a pile of cash, looking down at the peasants and telling us how hard their life is because the barista at Starbucks didn't memorize their pronouns. Cynthia Erivo, a woman who has reached the absolute pinnacle of fame, wealth, and social influence, wants you to believe she's oppressed because society isn't bending over backward to validate her grammar preferences. Let's get straight to the logical malpractice at play here, because this entire speech is built on a false equivalence. The idea that being misgendered is somehow on par with real hardship, as if someone forgetting to call you they is the same as being homeless, impoverished, or politically persecuted. Cynthia isn't fighting systemic oppression. She's fighting a mild inconvenience at best. And worse, she's dressing it up as a civil rights struggle so she can cosplay as a victim while cashing in multi-million-dollar checks and getting applause at this GLAAD convention or whatever the hell it is. Second, this entire monologue is dripping in emotional blackmail. It's not an argument, it's a guilt trip. It's easy, she repeats, as if anyone in the audience who doesn't co-sign her every whim is responsible for her suffering. But here's the thing. Respect and dignity aren't earned by demanding everyone rewrite language rules around your personal identity crisis. They're earned by character, not coercion. And let's talk about the gaslighting happening here. She frames this as teaching people how to address her, as if the rest of society is ignorant or malicious for not immediately conforming to her linguistic demands. No, Cynthia, you're not teaching, you're demanding compliance with a subjective, fluid, and frankly, incoherent framework that changes every 5 minutes. What you're attempting to do is rewrite language itself, then act surprised when people hesitate. Then there's her pretentious wordplay about they, them being a word used since the dawn of time. Nice trick. That's called a classic equivocation. Yes, they has existed forever, but as a plural pronoun or an unspecified singular in casual speech, not as a forced identity marker for individuals who want everyone else to participate in their self-concept and self-delusion. It's like saying the word queen has always existed, so you should call yourself one and demand everyone recognize you as royalty. Now bow down, peasant. And the most insulting part, the subtle appeal of pity woven through every sentence. She's framing this as a daily existential battle, as if she's dodging bullets instead of awkward stares. Meanwhile, she's rich, famous, adored by the entire entertainment industry, and showered with glowing profiles by every legacy outlet. There's no institutional barrier here. In fact, the system is bending over backwards to coddle this nonsense. What Cynthia conveniently leaves out is context. No one is kicking down doors to deny her basic dignity. No one is telling her she can't live her life or use whatever pronouns she wants. What people are actually pushing back on is a demand that language, biology, and social norms be compulsorily restructured around her personal feelings under threat of social and professional punishment. And here's a bitter truth she doesn't want to face. When you turn every minor inconvenience into an act of oppression, you devalue the real struggles of people who face actual material hardship. You're not Rosa Parks because someone used the wrong pronoun. You're a privileged multi-millionaire auditioning for a starring role in your own victim narrative. And the levels of arrogance this speech reaches is actually impressive because Cynthia Erivo actually says that they, them isn't just a pronoun. It's poetic because it represents that she's simply more what exactly? More self-obsessed? More detached from reality? This is the kind of delusion you only get from Hollywood elites who've been applauded so long they start to believe they transcend the laws of language and logic. It's not enough to be rich, famous, and adored. They need to be seen as something beyond human, as if their identity is so grand it requires a plural pronoun to contain it. It's narcissism wrapped in progressive jargon. And the worst part is they expect the rest of us to nod along and clap like trained seals while they rewrite the dictionary to match their bloated sense of self-importance. All in all, the irony here is staggering. Cynthia Erivo has more power, wealth, and reach than 99% of the planet, yet somehow she's still the oppressed one because someone might misgender her at Whole Foods. It's not bravery, it's narcissism masquerading as activism. And the fact that this is the hill she and her friends over in Hollywood want to die on tells you everything you need to know about how unserious this whole spectacle really is. And speaking of unserious spectacle, Hasan Piker interviewed Elon Musk's transgender son, and wow.
Oh wow, he's made another company that is single-handedly pushing humanity towards
Don't you
that,
always...
Oh my God, not colonizing Mars. That's not happening, people. It's a marketing scheme.
Yeah.
Do you know how long it would take to colonize Mars? Do you know how long it would take to terraform that thing? It's a marketing scheme that everyone somehow falls for. This is my native language, I promise. That everyone somehow fell for, despite being like debunked by a Google search. Like, are you serious?
No, I do think that we are progressively getting dumber and dumber as a society. Is one of the things that I yell about quite a bit. But this was, I mean, you're nailing a lot of the reasons why I was always initially annoyed with Elon Musk from the jump because of all of this stuff, where it was like, this is not happening. Like, I remember having these conversations with like the donut media guys who were like car guys, right? And I was like, on paper, I'm supposed to love this person because like, this is supposed to be like a green energy focused person who, but he's not, exactly. I'm saying like on paper, he's supposed to be like leading the charge on renewable energy and electric vehicles and yet, you know, he's such a fucking douchebag.
10 years? 10 years that facade worked? God.
Yeah.
No,
but I mean, okay, so but all of these lies though, it still seems to work because I mean, this is the first time I've ever experienced like I've expected, and people who understand the market a lot better than me have thought that like, oh, well, you know, we should short Tesla. It's inevitably going to
look up E ratio and then look at Tesla stock compared to other car companies.
Yeah, no, exactly, because it's not a car company, it's a tech company, right? It's just like a silly
it's not a car company, it's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, I feel bad for Elon Musk because to have this level of bitterness and confusion coming from your own family is tragic. This isn't just some random internet hater. It's his own child desperately trying to wound him publicly in front of millions, not with facts, but with borrowed talking points and petty rebellion. And that rebellion isn't new. It's as old as time. It's literally biblical. The story of Absalom comes to mind. King David's own son who turned against his father out of pride, envy, and a thirst to tear down what he couldn't control. What we're watching isn't financial analysis. It's an emotional temper tantrum disguised as economic commentary on Hasan Piker's platform, who, let's be honest, doesn't actually want to have an honest conversation about these points. He just wants the attention that comes with platforming Elon's transgender child. Now let's actually dissect the nonsense Vivian and Hasan Piker are spewing here, because it's a textbook example of intellectual laziness wrapped in smug arrogance. The entire argument rests on the claim that Tesla is a Ponzi scheme because it has a high P and E ratio. That's it. That's their smoking gun. But if either of them spent 5 minutes outside their echo chamber or cracked open an Econ 101 textbook, they know how idiotic that sounds. First, let's define a Ponzi scheme. It's a criminal fraud where returns to existing investors are paid with money from new investors without any real underlying business activity. There is zero evidence that Tesla operates like that. Tesla produces physical products, has billions in revenue, delivers vehicles, solar panels, batteries. You can literally go out and buy what they make. You can't say that about a Ponzi scheme. So their entire argument boils down to the company's price to earnings ratio being high. So what? P&E ratios are high for growth companies that investors believe will dominate the market long term. Amazon had an insane P&E ratio for over a decade while it reinvested heavily in infrastructure and growth. Same with Netflix. Same with Google early on. If you don't understand how investors value tech growth stocks differently from legacy manufacturing companies, you have no business commenting on the market. This is what's called a category error fallacy. Vivian and Hasan compare Tesla's P&E ratio to Ford, GM, and other companies, and then conclude that because Tesla's numbers don't look like theirs, it must be a scam. It's like comparing Apple stock valuation to Kodak and screaming fraud because they're not priced the same. Tesla is not valued like Ford because it's not just a car company. It's a vertically integrated energy and transportation tech company with massive stakes in battery storage, AI-driven self-driving, energy grids, and infrastructure. Whether you like Elon or not, that's the absolute truth. But that's not even the most dishonest part. Vivian and Hasan aren't here to debate market fundamentals. They're here to feed their confirmation bias and sling mud at Elon. It's a cheap personal attack, not an economic critique. Vivian's entire motivation isn't financial literacy, it's rebellion and resentment. And Hasan, he's just an opportunistic echo chamber for anti-capitalist rage, nodding along without evidence because it fits his prepackaged narrative. They also conveniently ignore Tesla's actual measurable success. Tesla dominates EV market share worldwide. It has built the largest global fast charging network. It has posted years of profitability and has cash reserves in the tens of billions. You may not like the stock price, but that's not a Ponzi scheme. It's a wildly successful, disruptive company that's fundamentally reshaping transportation and energy. Now, what makes the spectacle even more pathetic is the sheer projection at play. Hasan Piker, who built his fortune ranting on Twitch while selling cheap class warfare sound bites to his simping subscribers, is calling Tesla a Ponzi scheme. That's rich. Hasan's entire business model is literally predicated on monetizing outrage and feeding parasocial relationships for profit. There's no product, no innovation, just endless grievance content. And Vivian, the tragedy here is that instead of using his platform, intelligence, and resources to do something productive, he's burning bridges and peddling TikTok-tier economic analysis to get back at his dad. It's sad, it's transparent, and it reeks of entitlement. If anything, this whole exchange proves one thing. When you remove facts, context, and honest debate from the conversation, all you're left with is wounded pride and bad faith arguments. And no amount of misused financial jargon will change that. And here's a real question you should be asking yourself. How do we get to the point where millionaire streamers and the estranged children of billionaires are the loudest voices lecturing you about scams, oppression, and morality? What does this say about our culture when people with every material advantage spend their time tearing down the very systems that gave them their platform, all while disguising personal grudges and ignorance as grand social commentary? Maybe it's time to stop letting these professional malcontents define the narrative. Maybe it's time to ask why so many of the loudest critics aren't actually building anything, but are hell-bent on burning everything down. And most importantly, how much of what you're being fed is honest criticism? And how much is just the bitter noise of people desperate to tear down what they couldn't create themselves? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.